golf, there is but one hero who cast the longest shadow in the game's plentiful history. One hero who played for fun and never for money. One hero who always remained an amateur, but even the professionals couldn't conquer him. One hero lifted above adoring crowds throughout the world. His victories were the most astonishing. His conflicts, the hardest to overcome. His Grand Slam impossible to duplicate. He was the champion of champions. He set new standards for sport and sportsmanship, and through it all, he was always a gentleman. And during the next hour, you will see film footage never before seen on television. Hear eyewitnesses to our hero's legend and experience the drama of golf's greatest story as you share with us the most triumphant journey ever made in sports. A journey through the life and times of Bobby Jones. If there were a people on this earth who were able to recognize an uncommon champion of golf and of life, it must surely be the citizens of St. Andrews, Scotland, the home of golf. The Scots invented the game over 500 years ago, and over that time have developed a refined sense of what it takes to conquer one's own self in addition to the elements of the golf course. Not even as often as once a century, there rises above the crowd a singular person with personal qualities not easily seen in the rest of us. During the golden age of sports, such a singular champion arose who conquered the world of golf and life. He was Robert Tyre Jones, Jr. of Atlanta, Georgia, America. Jones captured not only the respect, but also the hearts of Scottish people and the world. They gave him a special name, Bobby, and even conferred citizenship upon him, an honor shared by only one other American in 1759, Benjamin Franklin.
We met here today to confer the freedom of the city and royal borough of St. Andrews on Mr. Robert Tyre Jones, Jr., of Atlanta, Georgia, United States of America.
What was so extraordinary about Bobby Jones that would prompt the very people who invented the game of golf to adopt him as one of their own? Jones understood the game of golf as reflective of the game of life. He was an extraordinary champion, matchless in skill and chivalrous in spirit. He was not just a hero as golfer, but also as a human being, what Gary Cooper was in the movies, the gentle, self-sufficient male, the wise innocent. Jones was in the flesh. And he was exactly the kind of hero longed for by the brash 1920s. In the years following World War I, America was a young country struggling to define itself through its heroes. And heroes were plentiful in the roaring 20s. There was Babe Ruth, and Ty Cobb, Jack Dempsey, Gene Tunney, Red Grange, and the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame, and the greatest hero of the decade, Charles Lindbergh. Only one man was ever to challenge Lindbergh's position in the hearts of Americans. The only person ever to receive two of New York's famous ticker tape parades. And he was Bobby Jones. Atlanta was a small southern city at the turn of the century, still struggling to shake off the devastating effects of the Civil War. Bobby Jones was born on St. Patrick's Day in 1902, the only son of Colonel Robert P. Jones, a prominent Atlanta lawyer. He was christened Robert Tyre Jones in honor of his grandfather. A sickly child, his parents moved him to the edge of Atlanta across the street from East Lake Country Club in order to give him a better environment for his health. He began to follow the best golfer at the club in order to imitate his swing.
Started just simply by walking around the golf course and watching Stuart Maiden play golf and trying to imitate his method. I didn't begin any formal lessons at that age. Then later on, as I'd get into trouble, I'd go to Stuart and go on the tee for 5 or 10 minutes, and he could usually straighten me out.
Stuart Maiden was one of the fine Scottish players who emigrated from Carnoustie. He became the professional at the East Lake Country Club and was known as Kilty the Kingmaker for his prowess in developing champions like Bobby Jones, Watts Gunn, and Charlie Yates. Charlie Yates' family grew up in the East Lake Golf Course with Jones. The Yates family had enjoyed a long tradition of producing champion-caliber amateur golfers. Charlie has enjoyed the longest tenure of any living member of Augusta National Golf Club.
I was born in 1913, Bob in 1902, so we were 11 years apart. We moved out to East Lake along the 4th tee when I was about 4 years old, and it wasn't long thereafter that I was slipping across the fence to see this a teenager by the name of Bob Jones, who I'd heard so much about. And I just can't tell you how much my friendship with Bob has meant to me. As a young fella, 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, he was always so kind, and I think about that great saying, says a man never stands so tall as when he stoops to help a boy. And he certainly helped me.
At the age of 10, he shot a 90 for 18 holes. By the age of 11, he was down to 80. He shot 70 the next year at the age of 12. By the time he was 13, he was banging out 250-yard drives. Bob's father recognized his son's uncommon talents and encouraged him to play in tournaments. And Bob's swing developed into timeless classical movements. Bernard Darwin was an admiring student of Bobby Jones' golf swing. He wrote, "I can remember the precise spot at Hoylake where I first saw the swing, soon to be familiar in the imagination of the whole golfing world. So swift in that it occupied so little time, with no suspicion of waggle, and yet so leisurely in its almost drowsy grace, so lithe and so smooth. There could be no more fascinating player to watch, not only for the free and rhythmic character of his swing, but for the swiftness with which he played." Amateur in 1916 was played at Merion Cricket Club in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, where young Jones proved to be one of the sensations of the championship, returning a score of 74, which was the lowest of the qualifying rounds. Although he eventually lost to the reigning amateur champion Robert E. Gardner, he made his mark as the youngest competitor ever to qualify and compete in the National Amateur. Known as the Dixie Whiz Kid, he went on to beat the former champion, Eben Byers, in the match known for the club throwing contest between the two young men. When Byers told his caddy not to retrieve a club he'd thrown into the woods, Jones was later heard to remark that he'd only won the match because his opponent was the first to run out of clubs.
Well, when I got old enough to know better, I quit breaking clubs in tournaments. But playing around home when I didn't have to be on my company manners, I must confess that I did get some pleasure out of throwing one every now and then. Of course, the club makers double-crossed me when they started making them out of steel shafts. I couldn't break those so easily.
During the 7-year period from 1916 to 1923, Bobby never won an important championship of the first class. His friend and biographer, O.B. Keeler, referred to this time as the 7 lean years.
He had a hard time because he was famous so early and he didn't know how to handle it.
The preeminent writer and historian in the world of golf is Herbert Warren Wind.
He could be charming as produced because he was very charming and he was very intelligent. So much was expected of him that it got to him. He never was able to win the championships that would have said, hey, Bobby is coming. He could win the Southern Open, but he couldn't win much more than that.
Jones' temper was born of extreme disappointment when the shot did not come off perfect. His ideals were set so high that he was disgusted when his stroke was not closer to the pin than he visualized. From 1916 to 1920, he won many tournaments while still a student, but he was unable to win any major title. In 1920, he won the Southern Amateur Championship at Chattanooga. He played in his first National Open in the same year at the Inverness Club in Toledo, Ohio. It was at Toledo that the 18-year-old met Harry Vardon, the old master of golf, and learned something of the English style of play.
And I was playing with Harry Vardon, who was a great English player, about 50 years old at the time. And Vardon was not in the habit of talking much on the golf course. And we had played to the 7th hole, and we both hit good tee shots right in front of the green. And there was no bunker or other obstruction. And Vardon played a nice little conservative run-up, and I decided I would play a fancy pitch. And he had put his ball about 4 feet from the hole, and I half-topped my pitch and put it in the bushes over behind the green. And as we were walking to the next tee, I said, Mr. Vardon, did you ever see a worse shot than that? He simply replied, no.
Vardon predicted after that tournament that Jones would become one of the greatest golfers the game had ever known. Another young player displayed his uncommon skill in 1920 at Toledo, and he became a close and lifelong friend of Bobby Jones. His name, Gene Sarazen.
Well, the first time I met Jones was in 1920. It was at the Inverness Country Club, Toledo, Ohio. I'll never forget. That was a great open because that's the first time I saw Vardon and Ray and Hagen, and they pointed out this boy from Atlanta that was his first open. Well, that was my first open. And you know, Jones and I were born about 2 weeks apart. We had quite a group of great players. Francis Ouimet, Jim Barnes, Jock Hutchison. Hagen was the leader. And Jones, great players, all won major championships. When they say that today you have quantity, but you don't have any better quality than we had in the 20s.
Jones once said, I never learned much of anything from matches which I won. If that is true, then young Jones learned greatly during the 7 lean years in which he never won a major championship. In the spring of 1921, Jones made his first transatlantic voyage to play in the British Amateur Championship at Hoylake and the British Open at St. Andrews, accompanied by an informal American team which played various matches with their amateur British counterparts. And from these beginnings, the Walker Cup competition was formally initiated the following year. On this trip, Jones played in his first British Open and came face to face with the old grey tune and the old course that were to have so much significance in his life, the formidable St. Andrews. The old course rose up out of the mists like some fearsome dragon, but Jones found to his surprise that he was no St. George. He was initially disrespectful of the course and thought it easy, yet was unable to make a good score. He excused himself by thinking the course was unfair and regarded himself as unlucky. Jones played the first 2 rounds leading all amateurs, but then, in the third, it was as if the ghosts of all the great players of the past rose up in defense of their beloved course and smote him a mighty blow for his irreverence. He played the outward half in a shocking 46 and made a double bogey on the 10th. On the 11th, he actually pocketed the ball. And while walking up the 12th fairway, he deliberately tore his scorecard to shreds. It was the most inglorious failure of Jones's career. The British press roundly criticized him, noting that Master Bobby Jones is a boy, and a rather ordinary boy after all. Bobby returned to America, resolved never again to be sabotaged by his emotions, and also resolved to make an effort to like St. Andrews. At home, even though he continued to finish well, he couldn't seem to win the big one. His confidence was at a low ebb. He turned dejectedly to Pop Keeler and asked, "I wonder if I'll ever win a championship." Ever the psychologist, Keeler sternly replied, "Son, you're the greatest golfer in the world, and when you get that conviction in your skull, you'll not only win one, but a lot of them." Well, the breakthrough came in 1923 at the U.S. Open Championship, contested at Indy. Coming to the final hole of the championship, Jones spoiled an otherwise good score with a double bogey 6, and he was forced to wait at the clubhouse and endure the agony of being caught from behind by a brave birdie on the 18th by wee Bobby Cruikshank. Even before Cruikshank came in, Jones flogged himself, saying he finished like a yellow dog. "I don't want to win the title this way," he said. "I know what they're saying. They think I'm a quitter because I had the championship in my pocket and I chucked it away. And they're right." The playoff again came down to the 18th hole, and it was here that Jones proved his mettle by refusing to play safe. He courageously went for the green from a very difficult lie, and his ball finished 7 feet from the pin to clinch his first major championship. USGA President Vanderpool awarded the trophy. The city of Atlanta and the South all paid their tributes to the new boy champion. There were speeches and smiles, and laughter, and more than a few tears, as this man and that spoke of the boy who had brought such great renown to his club, town, and state. In the next 7 consecutive remarkable years, Bobby Jones would always wear a national championship golfing crown. He won 4 U.S. amateur titles, 3 U.S. Opens, and 2 British Opens. He was also the only amateur to win the double, both the British and the American Opens in a single year, 1926. In 1927, Jones returned to St. Andrews, the site of his 1921 disgrace, and vindicated himself by successfully defending his British Open crown. He then endeared himself to the Scottish hearts forever by declaring that if he should win, the trophy would not return with him to the United States, but would remain in St. Andrews. As victory appeared certain, 10,000 grateful Scots surrounded the green. When Bobby sank the winning putt, the spectators enveloped him in an unabashed show of affection. They carried him aloft with an outpouring of emotion worthy of Robbie Burns. Bobby then returned to America and his other pursuits. While golf was important to him, it was only a small part of his life. He married his longtime Atlanta sweetheart, Mary Malone, in 1924. They had 3 children, Clara, Robert Tyre Jones III and Mary Ellen. Young Jones' studies and his family took up most of his time. He never got his priorities out of order. They were family, profession, and lastly golf. Because golf was never a life unto itself. Bobby Jones was literally a weekend golfer. From the month of October through March, he played little. He usually picked up the clubs around April and played himself into shape before entering the major championships. Jones had an extensive formal education. He received a degree in mechanical engineering from Georgia Tech. Thereafter, he entered Harvard, where he studied English literature and the classics. He entered Emory Law School, and after his first year took the bar exam to see how difficult it would be. To his amazement, he passed and was not required to graduate. He was immediately sworn in as a budding new lawyer for his father's firm, Jones, Evans, Powers, and Jones. By 1930, there were no more worlds for the 28-year-old Jones to conquer. He had captured all the significant national titles, and the only way to top that was to do what no one except Jones himself had ever considered possible, to capture them all in a single year, the Grand Slam. He told no one of this plan, not even his closest friend, O.B. Keeler, and very quietly proceeded on his own way. In the summer of 1930, Jones traveled with a large entourage, including the Walker Cup team, to play in Great Britain. He returned to St. Andrews to make another attempt at the one title that had eluded him, the British Amateur. In his first match, he beat Sid Roper, despite Roper's superb play. Later, he had to face the formidable Cyril Tolley.
Sweetser said to Jones, "Bob, what are you going to do about Tolley? He's supposed to be the longest player in the world and certainly the longest player in Britain." And Jones said to him, "Just don't worry about Tolley." So Tolley has the honor on the first tee, and he hits the ball, and Jones gets up and passes him by 50 yards. On the second hole, Tolley hits the ball again about 275. In those days, that was good. And Jones passed him again about 25 yards. After that, Tolley wasn't any good because he was pressing to try to hit as far as Jones.
After 8 grueling matches, he defeated Roger Weathered in the final. And he went on to Hoylake, where he won the Open, thus becoming the only player to simultaneously hold both titles in the 20th century.
This cup has been played for. I'm most cordially congratulating Mr. Robert T. Jones on having won not only the Amateur Championship at St. Andrews, but being here amongst us this evening as winner of the British Open Championship.
After winning the 2 British championships in 1930, Jones sailed for New York City, where he was given his second historic ticker tape parade. Mayor Jimmy Walker did the honors.
New York is proud of you and your accomplishment. But it was not foreseen nor expected that your coming would bring 2 other poles together. Namely, the world's greatest golfer to be welcomed by the world's worst golfer. Usually, you know, when someone else is making a speech, I get a chance to think about what I'm going to say. But you'd rather put me off my game, because I was listening to you this time. There's nothing that I can say which express my feelings half as well as saying simply
that I'm grateful to you and to the city of New York and to the people of Atlanta from the bottom of my heart. I've never been so impressed by anything in my life as the way you've turned out today. You've been so kind, there's really nothing I can say. Thank you.
Having won both British titles, the question then was, could Jones possibly win them all? The pressure from outside and within began to mount as he contested the U.S. Open in July at Interlaken, Minnesota. His 6-shot lead was reduced to a single stroke when his tee shot at the 17th hole found the water. The final hole was punctuated by tension and doubt as everyone feared the championship was slipping away. This formidable 40-foot uphill putt separated him from the title. Jones had captured the third leg of the Grand Slam. And now his secret plan was out in the open, as only the final championship remained. By the time Jones began the 1930 Amateur, the whole country had been caught up in the drama, and the pressure increased with each victory as Jones marched towards the final match. More than 18,000 enthusiastic patrons assembled at the Merion Cricket Club in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, for the Amateur Championship. Only Eugene Homans could halt Jones's seemingly inevitable date with destiny. Throughout the match, however, he began feeling a strain that had never touched him before. He was missing shots in an unaccountable fashion. His play was spotty, by turns brilliant, and then rubbish. Homans played courageously, but he could only extend the inevitable conclusion to the 11th hole. This victory was more than a mere U.S. Amateur Championship. Instead, as noted by O.B. Keeler with finality, this victory, the 4th major title in the same season and in the space of 4 months, has now and for all times entrenched Bobby Jones safely within the impregnable quadrilateral of golf. That granite fortress that he alone could take by escalade and that others may attack in vain forever. With the Grand Slam as the crowning achievement to his career, Bobby Jones had done all and more than had been expected of him. The promise of the boy had been fulfilled by the man, and now he could devote his time to his family and business. As long as golf is played, the question will always be asked, how good was Bobby Jones? He himself tried to avoid all comparisons, saying, all you can do is beat those who are around while you are around. And he did just that. Jones won 13 major championships in the 7 years between 1923 and 1930, playing against keen competition, including the all-time greats Walter Hagen and Gene Sarazen. He won 13 of 21 major championships in which he competed, and nearly half of all the tournaments he ever entered. And this from the man who never played more golf than the average club member.
One of the most superlative shot makers the world has ever seen before or since.
Paul Runyon, twice winner of the PGA Championship.
If he was playing a 380-yard 4-par hole, his club went up to about horizontal with that loose, wonderful swing, came down like it was in slow motion, and the ball went bullet straight about 240, 245. If he was playing a 445-yard hole, it didn't go back any faster. It just went back the same way, but it went back about 10 degrees farther. It came through with apparently the same motion, and the ball went 280. But if he's then playing a 515, 530-yard 5-par hole,
It went back the same rhythm, and that club dipped way down there, and it went back through with the same rhythm, and the blinking thing went 300, 310 yards with a hickory shaft. And do it all the time.
Although Jones had retired from competitive golf, he still kept a keen hand in the game. In 1930, he worked with A.G. Spaulding Company to design the most technologically advanced clubs at that time. Later that fall, he signed a contract with Warner Brothers of Hollywood to make 12 one-reel films entitled How I Play Golf.
The average golfer is not interested in winning championships. The chief benefits of the game for him must be recreation and the companionship of congenial friends. But it seems to me that that is little excuse for playing the game in a haphazard way. I have always thought that if a game was worth playing at all, it was worth making some effort to play it correctly.
Not only did Warner Brothers stars jump at the chance to benefit from his golf lessons, but stars from other studios sought and were granted special releases to participate. A very rare occurrence in those days.
Come on, wake up.
It wouldn't be until World War II that Studio Corporation would put so many stars from different companies on the screen together.
You look a little discouraged. Bobby, you've spoiled my whole day. I've given up golf.
Oh, it can't be that bad.
It's worse. You know, you don't deserve any credit hitting the ball with that swing of yours. Try to hit one with my swing.
Jones was not only a great player of golf, but a great writer and teacher. It gave him immense pleasure to impart to others his knowledge of the game he loved and played so well.
Well, we try to.
One of the many surprising things about him is that despite his expertise, he was not a golf snob and never actually cared about how poorly a man played, as long as he was a pleasant companion, good fun, and didn't take himself or the game too seriously. Although, as Alistair Cook relates, he always maintained his respect for golf's integrity.
Once in a national championship, he pushed his ball into the woods, and he went after it, and he was there alone, of course. And in standing to the ball, he just barely touched it. He came out at once, signaled his fault, penalized himself 2 strokes, and lost the championship by 1 stroke. And when he was praised for this and similar acts of sportsmanship, he was disgusted. He said, you might as well praise a man for not robbing a bank.
In the early 30s, Jones was able to realize one of his great dreams, to build the ideal golf course, and he did just that, the Augusta National. With the help of New York financier Clifford Roberts and Scottish architect Dr. Alistair Mackenzie, Jones discovered the perfect location for his dream course.
They discovered the Berkman's nursery and looked out in just that rolling area all the way down from the clubhouse down to Ray's Creek, and they said, Bob said, that's just made for a golf course. And he worked with Mr. Mackenzie in designing the various holes, and he wanted a lot of the holes to have the feel of some of the Scottish courses that he loved so much.
Mackenzie was a Scottish medical doctor who served in South Africa during the Boer War. There he learned the clever art of camouflage and adopted the same techniques in designing golf courses. His work is considered classic to this day. In describing Augusta National, Dr. Mackenzie acknowledged the genius of Bobby Jones's contribution, while stating, if, as I firmly believe, the Augusta National becomes the world's wonder inland golf course, this will be due to the original ideas that were contributed by Bobby Jones. I am convinced that from no one else could I have received such help. In 1934, Clifford Roberts, the first chairman, organized the inaugural Masters Tournament and went on to refine it into the premier golfing event in the world. The tournament was set apart from all others because of its host, Bobby Jones, who confessed the prospect of annually entertaining my old playmates and the later arrivals in the upper crust of competitive golf was quite attractive. But when Clifford Roberts suggested that the name of the tournament be changed to the Masters in 1938, Jones was initially concerned that it was too immodest. With time, however, Jones declared, "I think that it is now quite well entitled to be called the Masters because it has continued to assemble those who are entitled to be called the Masters of the Game. And there is no finer tournament in the world today." During his lifetime, Jones rejected all efforts to build a statue to honor him, his achievements, and his life. "This course," he said, "is memorial enough." In 1936, Bobby, Mary, and some friends from Atlanta sailed to Europe to attend the 1936 Olympics in Berlin. Stopping off in Great Britain, Jones expressed a desire to return to St. Andrews to play the old course once again. At the clubhouse, the name entered for the tee time read simply, R.T. Jones, Jr., Atlanta, and that was enough to spread the word like wildfire through the old gray town. When Jones arrived at the first tee, there were 2,000 people waiting. After 2 holes, the crowd swelled to 4,000. The entire town closed their shops, placing signs in the window, "Bobby's back." Jones played his most inspired golf in years. He went out in 32 and finished in 72, almost in a state of transport. Such a spontaneous show of warmth and affection he had never known in his entire life. Bobby Jones tended to become so emotional, he was reluctant to talk about it in later life. Jones volunteered as soon as World War II began. At age 40, he was commissioned a captain in the Army Air Corps. Later, he served as an intelligence officer with the U.S. 9th Air Force and landed at Normandy on D-Day, +2. Jones returned from World War II, a lieutenant colonel, safe and unharmed. But shortly thereafter, fate blew a cruel wind across his path.
In his middle 40s, he was paralyzed by a rare disease, and a journalist friend asked him what was the medical outlook, and he said, "I will tell you privately, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse all the time. But don't fret. Remember, we play the ball where it lies. And now let's not talk about this ever again." And he never did, down 23 years of increasing and in the end dire physical agony, retaining his humor and his generosity and his cat-like sense of the stranger being left out in the corner of the room.
In his later years, no longer able to enjoy his lifelong passion for golf, he turned to one of his other great loves, opera. He was especially fond of Puccini and his soaring arias. He also received consolation from his beloved Mary, family, and friends, and no one ever had more friends than Jones. He could travel the length and breadth of this land and never find a man to say a word against him.
Just about the worst thing that could happen to a great athlete happened to him, and I don't know anybody in the world who would have survived that like he did. Just put it behind him. He just lived his life. Play it like it lies. It was just the way he played golf.
He had incredible strength of character. As a young man, he was able to stand up to just about the best that life can offer, which is not easy. And later, he stood up with equal grace to just about the worst that life can offer. In 1958, all the golf nations of the world decided to get together and have a World Amateur Team Championship. Each nation sent 4 players. The United States Golf Association thought it would be a very good thing if they were able to persuade Bob Jones to be the captain of the team. Bob, by this time, had been an invalid for quite a few years, though he never acted as such. He accepted with pleasure. And on the Thursday evening, they were going to have a special meeting honoring Jones there at the largest hall in town. And I went with Billy Joe Patton. Jones had his leg attachments on at that time. He'd been helped onto the stage. But when the provost introduced Bob Jones, 2 amazing things happened. One, Bob sprang to his feet without anyone helping him and made his way to the microphones in a gesture that showed you how alive he was to this special situation.
I just want to say to you that this is the finest thing that's ever happened to me. And whereas that little cup was first in my heart, now this will be in my heart. I could take out of my life everything except my experiences at St. Andrews, and I'd still have a rich, full life.
Thank you.
I like to think about it this way, too, as I have several times, that now I officially have the right to feel as much at home here as I have presumed to feel unofficially for a number of years. Thank you very much.
And then Bobby began to help himself down from the platform to his golf cart to drive himself out of the building. And as he stepped down and got into the golf cart, the whole household there, maybe 700 people, they rose, and as one man began to sing in this terribly emotional way, "Will Ye No Come Back Again," an old Scottish song.
There's a love that cannot be. Will ye no come back again?
And the power and the emotion of this scene was such that when I piled out of the auditorium with Billy Joe, we walked down the street for about 70 yards before we even spoke to each other. And Billy Lynn said, typically, he's the greatest Southerner who ever lived. You will never see such a meeting of a foreign town and a foreign visitor.
In December 1971, Bobby Jones's years of suffering came to an end as he passed away peacefully in his sleep. In this modern era of crass commercialism, million-dollar endorsements and no-cut contracts, Bobby Jones's modest ideals of sportsmanship are unfashionable. Certainly the world would be a better place if we could see his like again.
In 1976, friends and admirers of Bob on both sides of the Atlantic decided to create in his memory a scholarship exchange program. It's between St. Andrews University in Scotland, the home of golf, and Emory University in Atlanta, Bob Jones's hometown. These exchanges are very important and very meaningful. We invite you to learn how you might help this wonderful tribute.